Okay.
The guy said the panel is
Mic might be on.
they can't hear anything. We'll just have to talk very clearly into the mics. It seemed like we were using for the. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, at the back. Can you hear? Okay, great. Thank you for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Just to remind everyone, would you maybe do a brief, very brief introduction with the question, what kind of robots do you guys use at home and at work?
You want to go first?
Sure. I'm Kaijen. I'm CTO of Mayfield Robotics. And at home, I actually don't have that many robots. I have a Roomba, and I have Alexa, if you call that a robot. At work, I have lots more robots. I have a whole fleet of curries, of course. But we also, at work, have all the fun robot toys. We bought some of everything. So, we have Cosmo, and we have, Lightning McQueen, and we have BB-8, and, all the toys.
Very cool.
I'm Dileep George. I'm co-founder of Vicarious. I used to have a Roomba a long time back, before I had kids. And I realized that I am spending more time cleaning Roomba rather than Roomba cleaning the rooms. So I sold it on Craigslist. At work, we have different robots. We have robots from Rethink, that's Baxter. And we have robots from Universal Robotics. So they have different arms, UR10, UR5. And we also have robots from ABB. So their robots are called ABB. And so we are trying to be hardware agnostic. We are trying to be on multiple platforms. That's one of the goals.
Yeah, so out of the robots you guys all have, which one are you most excited by, other than yours? Like one of them.
Oh, other than our...
Other than yours, yeah.
Oh, I'm excited about Curie.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited about Vicarious and what they're doing.
Oh.
My friend Bhaskara, who used to work with me at Will Garage, works at your company. And it's funny because I used to be a manipulation researcher, and he used to be a navigation researcher. So I came to Curry, and I was like, hey, Bhaskara, how do I do navigation? He was like, hey, Kaijen, how do I do manipulation?
Exactly, yeah.
It's very cool, yeah. So we invest in robots. We have seen a lot of robotics companies. One of the questions, I keep asking companies and keep thinking about is how ready do you think the robots are for mass market production? Because most of the companies we look at are pretty early in stages, raised a ton of money, but it's just not super ready for the mass market yet. What's your thoughts on that?
You want to go first?
So, I think it depends on which robot you mean. Like, Roombas have been out for a long time. So, mass market, that's definitely mass market, right? Mm-hmm. And there have been lots of other cleaning robots that are out there. Bosch has an autonomous lawnmower, for instance, although only in Europe. In terms of the new crop coming out, well, Jibo just finally launched and actually shipped some robots. So I guess that's ready for mass market. And, Sony just announced Aibo, which I think is super cute. So, robots are starting to come out there in the home robot space.
Yeah, so I agree with that. Depending on what your definition of the robot is and what kind of task that you want the robot to accomplish. Right. So even on manipulation tasks, you can say that cobots, which are robots that can work alongside with humans, compared to the huge industrial robots. The cobot market is picking up, and even without a lot of intelligence, it can still be very useful in some very repetitive tasks.
Right.
So I think we are going to see more and more adoption of those robots in manufacturing or warehouses.
What about robots that doesn't just handle one thing, multiple things, like robots in warehouses? You can do a variety of things, and consumer robots like last mile delivery robots. Those are a little bit trickier to build than Roomba. What do you think about those? Are they actually on the track to be ready?
Those are challenging. So even the last mile delivery problem. Think of the wide variety of stuff you find in a driveway. A robot cannot navigate my driveway because my kids make things in the driveway and they leave things in the driveway.
Yeah.
So being able to navigate those successfully, and you know, when the robot comes, maybe the kids will mess with it. So so those environments are definitely very challenging. So I think a better way to approach the problem would be to go from structured to semi-structured to, you know, take small steps on the way rather than solving a really challenging last mile problem.
So some last mile things are kind of there already in that, for instance, Mayfield is in Redwood City, and Starship is actually doing deliveries of meals to people using their robots.
Yeah.
And of course, they still have minders, and there's still some teleoping from the other, like far away somewhere, making sure that the robot does what it's supposed to do. But it is largely autonomous, I believe. And I'm a strong believer in human-in-the-loop robotics, in that we can start out with things where there's a lot of human involvement to make sure the robot does what it does, but then, you know, over time, you can gather all that training data and then do deep learning or whatever it takes to make it able to be more and more autonomous over time.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good strategy where you get human in the loop, and the exceptions can be, especially if it can be handed over easily to a human operator. That's a great strategy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. A lot of robots are not ready today, but you collect more data with human in the loop. The question then is, you know, it gets very expensive to run a human operation, human fleet, and a robot fleet, especially hardware is very expensive. So you see a lot of robotics company, they don't make money at the beginning. They raise a ton of money, and they go for a number of years before the unit economics actually works. Do you think, how long do you think it will take for this to be ready to actually replace human, in the sense that economically it's also ready, not just, you know, functionally? Because you can build a robot for like 100 grand, right? Or that's not gonna make the business sustainable.
I think the trick is in what fraction is autonomous. So how many robots can a single human control? And so because if there are 100 robots out there, you don't want 100 humans to be controlling. So if that ratio can be brought down, then I think it can be made economically viable.
And already, I think there are a lot of business models where it is already economically viable, because you can have a robot that is largely autonomous and only needs some human assistance. So a single human can be call center person for maybe 10 robots. And that is already economic as it is.
Interesting. Which ones can you give some examples of like which ones are kind of already ready, which ones will take a little bit longer to be ready?
For instance, if you look at Savioke, they do hotel robots. And the robots are largely autonomous. They just, every once in a while, a robot will get stuck or need a little help in navigating an elevator or something.
Right.
And so someone will just log in and help it out a little bit. But most of the time, the robot does what it does. And their model, I think, is already perfectly fine profitable. And, you know, my husband works at Cobalt Robotics, which is an indoor security robot company. And it's likewise, like, you know, they have robots roaming around companies, and there's a single pilot who's monitoring several robots. That's, I think, already a model that works out.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, okay, then my next question is, when do robots will actually replace human, given that you both think, you know, some of them at least are ready?
A human as in like...
As in, what percentage of human work will be replaced actually by robots? And what kind of work?
So I think already we are seeing, starting to see, for example, delivery robots is one area. Inventory management. So we already have seen many robots doing, keeping track of inventory in a warehouse or on a shop floor. We also have seen, for example, Brain Corporation doing the shop version of Roomba, where it's doing cleaning of the shop floor. So these are all cases where robots are replacing human labor, and that trend will only accelerate as far as I can see. You know, in the past, we of course have had new jobs come in when, you know, the jobs were taken. So it's to be seen at what pace those new jobs come in versus the pace of the technology.
Yeah, I think talking about the new jobs that are coming is the better way to look at it. I mean, on the one hand, yes, robots are replacing a lot of roles, But it's more like they're augmenting people. So you have one human who can do the job of many, and so okay, maybe you don't need as many people doing that exact job anymore. But oftentimes what that does is it opens up new opportunities and new businesses, and so that you might end up with actually more people doing it overall. So that was definitely the case with ATMs, for instance. You don't have almost any bank tellers whose job it is just to give out money anymore. But there are actually more bank tellers now than before ATMs were introduced, because banks were able to open all over the country where they could not before. And I think it's going to be a similar thing with robots. Right now we see that robots are starting to become more capable, especially in industrial environments, logistics, that sorts of things. But I personally think that that's just going to enable more and more businesses everywhere, and you're going to need call center people and minders and robot maintainers and all that sort of thing. And the total number of jobs in the end, I think, is probably going to exceed what it's replacing right now.
What kind of jobs should the audience be looking forward to go to in the future if their job were replaced by robots?
Well, I mean, I think probably the people in this audience are not likely to be the sorts whose jobs are going to be replaced anytime soon. The fact that they're here is a bit of a selection bias. But in terms of, if you get into robotics and you start creating these technologies that start out human in the loop and use deep learning and get more autonomous, these things over the next decade are going to be taking off, and it's a great field to begin right now.
Very cool. So my next question is, you guys focus on the consumer market and kind of enterprise B2B market. Are there unique challenges when you deal with each of the market in terms of technology, go to market, that you like to share with the audience?
Yeah, and I think the challenges are very, very different when it comes to these different markets. In enterprise market, you have to spend quite a good amount of time customer development, and you want to make sure that your product is solving a customer's problem rather than just solving a theoretical problem somewhere. So those things take time. You have to be on the field, visiting these places where they need robots, and talking to potential customers, and bringing the customer feedback right into your development cycle. And that takes time and is challenging. And so it's and the amount of robustness that is required for final deployment, that's a shift that you have to make from just a research mentality to be able to make a product that works in the real world. And some of these problems are also really challenging. And Kaijen can talk about the challenges in the consumer market.
In the consumer market, I mentioned a little in my talk that consumer acceptance of robots is not that high, and awareness of, and also, I mean, the technologies that enable robots at a price point that people want them at, and that do features that people want in the home, is just starting to begin now. And so the challenges are increasing awareness and making the technology something that people want at a good price point, and getting the word out that these things exist and you might want one, and making them cute enough that people actually want to have them.
Makes sense. What areas do you think will be the biggest opportunity going forward for consumer and also enterprise in terms of robotics taking over for human?
So in the consumer space, I like the strategy Curie is following. So you do have to make them acceptable to humans. You have to, if it's just a mechanical arm, or if it doesn't look attractive enough, people won't pay attention to it and people won't interact with it. So getting that human interaction correct is, I think, critical. And that's where Curie is focusing on, I think. And in the enterprise space, what I see is that there is definitely a lot of demand. So it's not it's people are asking for these solutions because there are some advantages to robots as opposed to humans. Because one is the elasticity of, so if demand picks up suddenly, you need more humans to do a task, and that is very hard to ramp up. And similarly, when demand goes down, you have to ramp down. So dealing with these kinds of variations is very challenging when it is. So there is a lot of demand for automation in the enterprise space, although it is fragmented and tough to crack, etc. But the demand is there.
Yeah, there's definitely demand in all sorts of realms. I have friends starting robot companies in all sorts of different spaces, be it like industrial or logistics or all these different things, security robots. And robots are going to be taking over a lot of things in a lot of spaces in the next few decades.
how far is each of your company from kind of just go-to-market mass adoption for you? I know you're just launching now.
Yeah, we're launching our first robots in December, but most of them will come out next year, mid next year, and yeah, we're at that point, I hope, ready for mass market.
Very cool. What about you guys?
We are in the prototyping phase.
Prototyping phase. How far do you think?
I don't want to make any public predictions. Yeah.
What about your competitors?
Well, the space is big, and we have a very unique position. So I think we are pretty competitive in the space.
So particularly for your company, lots of factories are in Asia. Globally, do you guys work with companies mainly here or globally?
Both. So yeah, we do have investors who are from China, and they are very interested in the Chinese market,
Right.
and so we have entry points there. And of course, there's a good amount of domestic manufacturing as well.
Right. Do you think the factories are different in different geographies? Like factories in China are different from factories in here?
Yes. So we have visited factories in these places, and they are not that different. So they all have roughly the same characteristics. And in fact, some of the factories that are being operated in China are from the US companies. For example, Flex is a company which operates factories in multiple continents. So yeah, factories are roughly similar.
Gotcha. My last question, to let me know time is up. You've heard of Sophie, who got the Saudi citizenship, and it's a robot that, trying to be a human. What do you think about this? Like, is it more a marketing thing, or, is it good for us, is it not good?
I think it is a bit of a PR stunt, but I think it's good in terms of raising awareness of robots, and it's great to see that robots are something that people care about a lot all over the world, not just in the US and Asia, where you hear a lot about robots, or in Europe, but in countries like Saudi Arabia even.
Yeah, I think it's a good PR stunt, and of course, Saudi Arabia has to solve a lot of problems. In addition to giving citizenship to robots, they have to make women equally empowered as citizens, etc. So it's a good PR stunt probably, but it's in the right way.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.